I'm Father Dave Pavanka. As president of Franciscan University of Steubenville, it is my joy to meet people from all over the United States and around the world. They're talented, they're holy, fiery, and funny, and I so enjoy speaking with them. Recently, I had an in-depth conversation with author, wife, and mother Emily Stimpson Chapman about her new book, Letters to Myself from the End of the World. This inspiring, wise, and entertaining book is a collection of letters Emily wrote to her 25-year-old self during the turbulent summer of 2020. Emily and I spoke about her book's themes of suffering, hope, and food and the Eucharist, adoption and motherhood, the power of grace to transform every part of our lives. And this is our conversation. I think one of the memories I have most was when I was a postulant. And somebody said, I was kind of fooling around. I was waiting for that, by the way. I was fooling around and
You're long.
yeah,
You're on.
I was fooling around and he says to me, I used to think you were holy, but now I realize you're an extrovert. and honestly, that just devastated me because, well, there was actually one of the things I struggled with when I decided to become a religious was this call to be holy. I've always wanted to be holy. And when he says, you're an extrovert and you're not going to be holy, that totally dived into what my biggest fear was that, Dave Pavanka was not going to be holy. But you start the book on that. Why do you choose to even start the book on holiness?
Because I think we have all these misconceptions about what holiness is, and everything else flows from that. So if you don't understand holiness, if you don't understand the purpose of the life of faith, if you don't understand what the journey, some semblance of what the journey is going to look like, nothing else is going to make sense. You can't respond correctly to injustice. You can't respond correctly to problems in the church. You can't deal with social media, or babies if you don't understand holiness. You also
go back to how hard it is to have babies. Oh, come on. No, but I think that's because at the heart of it is that is ultimately what we're called to. Is that it's one of the beautiful things I actually love about Vatican II is this call to be holy. This idea that holiness is for those people or for somebody else is something that the church has really invited us to move away from.
No, the church wants us to understand holiness is for everyone.
Right.
God made all of us to be holy. That's why he created us. Because when I was writing the book, similarity in words popped up and I was like, oh, of course. And it was the word wholeness. Wholeness is holiness.
Yeah.
We're broken, but God created us to be whole. He created us to know him, to be fully the people who he wanted us to be from the beginning. And that's what holiness is. Holiness is the process of becoming whole.
Well, and I think that's what you do in the letters that you're writing to yourself. You put more of that in there. But that's you when you read the letters that you're writing to yourself, that's really what you come to see is this. For you, it was this coming to understand more deeply that the Lord was calling you to be holy. And what does that actually look like? As a 23-year-old, what did you see holiness? And now what do you see holiness to look like?
Well, I thought it was simple. I thought it was going to be I'm going to go to confession every day, which I did sometimes because I was a little on the scrupulous side. Just a bit scrupulous. The priest would be like, why are you back?
Again.
Again, I'd be like, but Father, I wasn't really sorry yesterday. I'm really sorry now. So I thought it would be a fast process that enough masses, enough confessions.
So once you decide to follow the Lord, you're there.
Yeah,
right?
that's it. Yeah. And then it was going to be, I was just going to be holy and I was going to levitate. I don't know. I was never going to lose my temper again. I was never going to be impatient or jealous or vain or prideful. It was there was going to be this transformation in grace and the sacraments were going to make it.
Kick in, right.
Yeah, it was going to be easy. The Holy Spirit was just going to take over. And it didn't work that way.
What are you doing?
It takes time.
What are you doing?
It's risotto. Right. It's like holiness. See, it takes time. You can't make it all at once. You can't just dump it in. It's lots of time and repeated. It's like the sacrament. See, grace.
Do you like this? Do you enjoy cooking?
I love cooking. I like cooking the risotto most because it's it requires so much of me. It's not like I just chop it and throw it in the oven. I have to pour myself into it.
I have to imagine cooking for kids drives you crazy.
My kids like my food.
Well, I don't doubt they do, but they also like chicken McNuggets.
They do, but then I could feed them that for breakfast and lunch, and then I feed them what I want for dinner. So Toby's 3. So Toby, some days he likes our food and some days not. Beckett eats like a man. Like,
Good.
He eats like a man. So.
When you reflect on the call to be holy and your 23 self, what's like the number one thing you've learned? Is time it, that it's a process?
It's not just that it takes a while. I mean, it's a lifelong work of growing in grace, but in some ways it's very cyclical. I feel that through life, I'm always revisiting my besetting sins and my deepest struggles. And when I get to, so I'll think I'll have made progress. Like, okay, I've really mastered not losing my temper. And then I get into a new situation with like our house renovation or with marriage or the babies or a new project with work. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm back. How did I get back here again? Because the sin goes, the brokenness goes so deep, and we don't know how deep it goes.
Well, and that's what you're talking about at the very beginning in some of your earliest letters, just that brokenness and how do you reconcile? Yeah, I think some people actually feel that because of their past or what they've experienced in the past that they can't really be holy, or their family was so messed up and so screwed up that holiness is, and this is actually one of the things I think that the people who write the lives of the saints do a disservice to, is you don't get a whole picture oftentimes. You know, these saints that were holy since the time they were 8 months old. I mean, that's why I love the saints that wrestled and weren't always perfect, and but that's what you talk about, this idea that perfection and holiness and past and sinfulness, that's all a part of the journey for you.
You know, it was one of the great blessings of my life is all the writing I've gotten to do about the saints. Because when you get away from the 35 word summation of their life that you get on a holy card or in, Wikipedia or something, and you start digging into it, you're like, man, it was not just here's grace and then they're off and running straight into Jesus's arms. For most of them, there was a real struggle. And there were saints like Catherine of Siena, who she did pretty much this. She talks about the bridge and she's like off and running. But Hildegard of Bingen was one of my favorites because she was so feisty and she would get so angry and so willful and really was not very nice and charitable in most of her letters that she wrote to people. But by the time you get to the end of her life, she's being described as this gentle mother, and people who meet her who've heard all about her reputation are shocked by how she is, because Grace, over this long life, she lived to be 82, did this slow, steady work in her heart and gentled her and rooted out sin. But she stumbled a lot along the way. And so just learning to give ourselves the same mercy that God gives us and to recognize God is patient. And so we need to be patient with ourselves.
Honestly, I think that's one of the biggest struggles we have is this inability for us to actually be patient with ourselves. It's like, I have this idea of what it is to be holy, right? And unfortunately, I think sometimes it's this caricature that's not really possible. And the other part is that I'm pretty sure a holy person, they're very stoic, they're probably English, they bow a lot, they have incense on them just in case you need it. And growing up, people would say when I finally became a priest, because there were 5 boys in my family, I didn't know how to take this because so many of them said, I thought one of the Pavankas would be a priest. I just didn't think it was going to be you, but it goes back to that experience as a postulant, is we have this image of what it is or what it looks like to be holy. And that's where I think the church is doing a better job at putting forward saints that were normal people, right? That we can relate with, that have a story. That's not to say that there's not a past or struggle or difficulty in sin, because that's all a part of it.
No, and a lot of times our greatest strengths are our greatest weaknesses.
Yeah, Paul.
And so, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's learning to say, okay, God has given me, I'm like a walking stereotype of a redhead. You know that.
I'm not even going to mention. I have no idea what I should say to that.
Yes, you were a walking stereotype of a redhead. I am though. Like, I'm so passionate and fiery, and I fly off the handle quickly, and I have quick reactions to everything. And that can be really bad. Like, I can roll over people. I can not be sensitive to people. Or I can harness that and I can use it to serve the church, and I can be passionate for Jesus, and I can be passionate about serving people. But
did you also know that, like when you first, again, you're writing stories to yourself, writing letters to yourself, when you were 24 years old, Did you think some of these things were things you had to get through, get over, rather than that they were going to be your vehicle to being holy?
I thought I had to be gentle and meek and mild and not have opinions.
Well, let me just say, one ought not be opposed to being gentle, meek, and mild, but keep going.
But gentle, meek, and mild, not in the sense of like teachable and controlling my strength and not like throwing flames at people, but in the sense of being like weak. And I thought gentleness was weakness. I thought meekness was being a doormat. Mm-hmm. I thought mildness was never having an opinion. Yeah. Okay. And so the more I came to realize that gentleness was controlling your strength and meekness was teachability, and being mild just meant, practicing temperance with your own personality. But that I could still have, but I tried, did I ever tell you about the Lent? I tried to give up opinions for Lent.
So on Ash Wednesday, did you make it to, so you're clear, I don't know, you were saying Lent you were going to give up opinions?
For Lent, I was going to give up expressing my opinions.
And that lasted till breakfast on Ash Wednesday?
4 minutes, maybe, like it was so bad. But I kept trying to do it, and I kept trying to do it. But what was really good about that Lent was realizing that what God was asking me to do was express my opinions in a way that was more considerate of others and that was more loving. So it's not the opinions that were the problem, but how I express them. Yeah,
and you make allusion to that I forget where it was.
Because God gave me a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, you make reference to that, just that sense of being able to be yourself and not be somebody else.
Right.
And the Lord is ultimately going to use that.
Which really is what holiness is. It's becoming yourself, and it's the brokenness getting healed. And it's all of the wounds that have made you anxious or made you insecure or have caused triggers to how you react to things. That where your anger is leading or your woundedness is leading. It's letting that be healed and letting the strengths come out.
What was that time, that place, the circumstance that you realized that the Lord wanted you to be holy? What was that encounter? You speak of some of the conversion moments for you in your first 23 or something like that?
Well, I mean, really, so there was 2 conversions. There was 19, which is when I made the commitment to follow Jesus. A lot of that had to do with a really cute Protestant boy. So it wasn't the best, but it was an honest, sincere commitment to follow Jesus.
Really? Follow Jesus or follow?
Follow Jesus.
Right.
It wasn't that bad. I never married him. But no, it was, and then getting to know who Jesus was. And I've always said I'm really grateful for my years with those Protestants because it was from them that I learned what a daily walk with Jesus looks like and an honest relationship, and that it's not just going to Mass on Sundays, but living every moment of my life with him, like knowing he's always with me, he's always there.
Was there a moment you said yes to the Lord, like kind of this?
There was.
What was that?
I was a sophomore in college. It was I guess it was April of my sophomore year, and I just gotten back from spring break, and I was the least fun spring breaker in the world because I took all these books with me about faith and like the closing of the American mind, and I'm like reading all this heavy stuff on the beach because I was super fun like that. But I had gotten to a point where if you look back at all my notebooks from that time, there were all these question marks all over them because I was questioning everything. Because if there was truth, there had to be one truth, or there was no truth. It's either Jesus or nothing, or truth or nothing. And I was sorting through everything. And at one point, everything just made sense. Like Jesus, it was the C.S. Lewis, Lord, liar, lunatic argument that convinced me. And I remember kneeling down.
Explain that.
That Jesus is either a lunatic because of the things he's running around saying, like, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Like, okay, you're the way, the truth, and the life. Or he was a malicious person who's lying because he's trying to harm these people and, gain power or something through saying that, which he wasn't doing. And he seems so sane. So he wasn't a lunatic, or he was Lord. He was who he said he was. And it was so logical to me that I was like, okay, that's clear. And so, I remember.
Was it intellectual, or was there your heart a part of that?
It's both. It was intellectual and my heart. Okay. I think first I gave my mind to Jesus. And as soon as I gave my mind to Jesus, he renewed it, and that changed my heart. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the emotions followed very quickly from my mind. But that's how it was when I came back into the church 6 years later. It was a question of authority. And so I knew Jesus was real, and I believed scriptures were the word of God. But why would we wouldn't have the scriptures without the church.
So you quit going to church for those years?
Well, I went
to Mass.
I quit going to Mass for about 5-6 years. Yeah. So, and then a Franciscan University graduate who I worked with.
In D.C., right?
In D.C. at the Heritage Foundation. He started putting more questions to me about the church and the authority of the church. And I started reading. So I was reading like a crazy person for a while. And the authority argument, again, it was my head. Like my head was convinced. And then my heart followed. So I've always been grateful for that, because the life of faith, there's a lot of emotions, and emotions come and go. But having that grounding in the intellect and knowledge, paired with a personal relationship with Jesus, I think has helped me navigate a lot of the obstacles to holiness that have come up through the years, because the journey's not easy for anybody.
About the obstacles, you talk about some of the struggles you had. You mentioned eating and struggle with eating several times about that. Did you have to reconcile those struggles with the call to be holy?
Well,
in the situation with food?
I had to come to terms with the fact that my body was holy and matter was holy, and God worked through the world. I had a very Protestant understanding of grace and the human person, where I saw my body as bad, I saw matter as neutral, maybe not bad, but through the Eucharist and through that encounter with the Eucharist, coming to see that, how God works through bread and wine and water and oil, and he physically, he gives himself to us physically, and he gives grace to us physically. And so, and that it's day after day after day. It's not just you're baptized, you're good to go, because that doesn't make sense. Like that never made sense to me. Like I'm baptized, I profess my faith in Jesus, and everything's good, even if I'm being a completely rotten person. But to see how that grace is just poured out daily, it's offered daily over the course of a lifetime, that helped me to see that holiness was going to, it was going to take a while. It was going to be a journey, but that it was a very personal journey with God giving himself to me. And so, I guess the food was a part of it, but more it was coming to see that God made me good. Because I think like a lot of, I don't know how much men struggle with this, but
we don't.
I know, you have lots of things you don't have to struggle with. But I wasn't we'll talk about this at another point, but I didn't feel like I fit in always as a woman. I wasn't sure what a woman was supposed to be. And was I supposed to be that version of meek, mild, and gentle? Was it, how do
but
I
isn't
be
that
holy?
hard? Isn't that hard for a woman of faith? Because you've got, you're right, we will talk quite a bit about this, because one of your whole chapters deal with that. But this idea that the world, the culture says it is to be a woman, and trying to reconcile that with who the Lord may be calling you to be, and those voices that go through your mind and your heart.
I felt like a bad woman.
Yeah.
I'm not good at being like really meek and mild and gentle in the way that I thought I was supposed to be meek, mild, and gentle. And I wasn't good at being like, sexy lady woman. So I'm like, I don't know. How does that fit in for me?
What's going on here?
I have to, I'm running out of broth, so I'm adding a little bit of water in so that the risotto is not crunchy. It's like an art. I get it. It's like holiness. You kind of have to move along as you go.
One of the things you talk about is, and it really resonated with myself, is this holiness and perfection. I remember I was doing a men's retreat in Columbus, Ohio, and I always, when I'm doing this, particularly talking about holiness, and it's actually, I think it's my favorite, one of my favorite topics, because ultimately I think that when I first sensed the Lord's call to be holy, it just penetrated my heart, and I said, yeah, that's what I was supposed to do. But I always ask people, I said, who here believes you're holy? Raise your hand. because there's this attitude of what it is to be holy, and nobody quite feels like they measure up. So I'm with this men's group, and I say, who here feels like they're called to be holy, or it feels like you're holy? And this guy raises his hand and he stands up, which totally ruined the whole talk, because my point is that nobody feels, right? So I thought, oh crap. So
some confidence.
Yeah. Well, so after the end of the talk, he comes up to me and he says, what did you ask? What was that question you asked? I said, who here feels like they're holy? And he goes, oh, I thought you said who here feels like they're elderly.
Oh.
I said, that's not what I said. But this again, this perception of the relationship between holiness and perfection.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things I talk about in the book is you're not called to be different than you are. You're called to be better.
Yeah.
And so, like, who God made you to be, with your quirks, your strengths, your opinions, your extroverted personality,
right.
your introverted personality, whatever it is, like, that's you. Like, you don't have to fit into the Therese of Lisieux or, you know, St. Francis of Assisi model of holiness. Like, there's only one Therese, there's only one Francis.
But and that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be.
And that's what makes it interesting. When you look at the world God's created with all the different animals, all the different bugs, like you see giraffes, like God thinks that everything is so unique and so particular. So, but then we are called to be better than we are. So that seeing that brokenness, the difference between being better but not different, for me was really healing. Being like, oh, it's okay. I can be holy as someone who's feisty and a little bit sassy and, you know, full of opinions, a little bit sassy. Yeah. Working on it. Yeah. I can be mean, but I have to be that in a way that's loving. I have to be that in a way that's responsive, that's gentle.
No, and I think there's something really beautiful about that the students will come to when they come to realize that God wants them to be holy. Get rid of sin, heal the brokenness, heal the woundedness, all of that. But he's not asking you to be somebody else or someone else, because we've already got a Dave Pavanka, we already got an Emily, right? And that there's something really freeing and liberating about that God, we're ultimately called to be holy because God is holy. And to the degree that he manifests himself and transforms us and comes with his grace, he allows us to be who we were always created to be, his son or his daughter.
And I think social media, which we'll talk about later, but that confuses people too, because they see these images of this is what a holy Catholic family looks like. This is what a holy Catholic woman looks like. And so getting that out of your head, like, no, it's okay. Like, you don't have to be like that person who speaks at the youth conferences. You don't have to be like the person whose account you follow on Instagram. Like, you're supposed to be you. And it's just looking into your heart and seeing where you're not letting God in or where you're not responding from faith, and then going from there. And that is so freeing.
Yeah. One of the things you talked about that I also thought was interesting, and I'm looking for it, it's the deism, what was it?
Oh, moral therapeutic
deism. Yeah. Just that sense of kind of self-help. So say it again.
Yeah, well, so was it 2005, there was a book that came out from, I think it was Christian Smith, where he talked about the religious faith of young people. And I think we did a story on this.
I remember exactly where I was when we talked. It was in Louisiana. I was sitting underneath my car in an underpass. That's right.
This was like forever and ever and ever ago. Yeah. But he talked about moral therapeutic deism, where the religious faith of most teenagers at the time was God was kind of he was a grandfatherly therapist in this guy. He was cool with whatever they did. He just wanted them to be kind. Maybe that would be good. And they could, whatever made them happy, they could do, whatever religious practices. So it was sort of, it wasn't about transformation. It wasn't about dying to yourself. It wasn't about conforming yourself to him. It was just God is lovely. And so, it bothered me because it always seems that was 15 years ago. So now it's like the faith of half the country easily, where people think that. Well,
but today it's the religious, is it spiritual, not religious?
Spiritual, not religious. Yeah.
But in essence, it's a God with no boundaries.
A God with no boundaries.
No
a God
expectation.
who's not paying that much attention. Like maybe he's going to give you a nice house or a car or something like that. But it's not hard. Like people don't expect. It's like a 12-step program, where it's going to make me better. Like holiness is going to make me better. Holiness is going to make me happy according to that line. And it will make you better and it will make you ultimately happy. But Jesus died on the cross so that we could know him and be transformed in holiness. And then there's resurrection. But for each of us, there has to be death before there's resurrection. And it's not about ourselves. Like, it's not, holiness isn't about us. It's about Jesus. It's about falling in love with him.
That's right. And that's a danger. And actually, the Holy Father has spoken a lot about it, the whole Pelagian danger that says that all I have to do to be holy is make up in my mind I want to be holy. That's the first step that I need. What are you doing?
I'm eating. I see if it's done.
All right. Is it?
Almost.
Okay. But the Holy Father speaks about that we are not able to be holy just because we want to. We're holy because God is holy. Holy is much more, honestly, it's much more about relationship with, like you said, with Jesus. I've met people, honestly, who struggle tremendously with addiction, with past sin, sexual sin, all kinds of stuff. And there is a holiness about them, that they've wrestled with that. They've been challenged. They've been humbled with that. And then people who've never had any of those quote unquote great struggles, but there's not a sense of holiness to that person. One could be virtuous or without fault maybe, but there's something different about holiness that you can tell a really holy person, we'll talk about this more later, you can tell they've suffered. You can tell they've been burdened. You can tell that they've had a hard time.
I mean, when you suffer, if you are suffering with Jesus, that transforms the suffering. And that, I mean, holiness, you're just in love with Jesus. You've been with him on Calvary and you've seen what he's doing. And so even as you're still stumbling, even as you're failing, that love is sustaining you and tempering you and pushing you places you wouldn't go. So I think that's why you have to remember it's a relationship. It's not like I'm going to be holy Catholic. You can't just set out to do that. You have to fall in love with Jesus and you have to cling to Jesus. And if you do that, he will make you holy because he wants you to be holy.
Yeah, all the other things that you said, he does in the light of that, the woundedness, the brokenness, the insecurity. It's in relationship with him that's all going to be redeemed and made new. And yeah, I remember when I did the Camino, I walked that Camino. You're going to walk the Camino sometime? You want to walk across Spain for 500 miles?
With 3 children, 3 and under?
Okay.
Are there hostels that will let us in?
No kids allowed.
Give me a decade.
My first night, I was sitting in just a really beautiful chapel, a little Gothic chapel in southern France. And I said, this was a scary prayer. And again, it was a foolish prayer, but every now and then we get it right. And I said, God, do whatever you want to do to make me holy. And honestly, that's the deepest desire of my heart is I want to be holy. And I said one time, I said, take away anything in my, still, I mean, I've prayed this before. It's still, take away anything in my life that keeps me from being holy. And that's giving God permission, right? But what's the alternative? Letting me hold on to it or,
No, I mean, it's once you start seeing when you see him, everything that is not of him, even when it's hard to let go of, even when you think you've given it up and then you find it again, you don't want it there. Like it's him that transforms everything. He transforms your vision. But he did make you president of a university during a pandemic.
He did, which I
he seems to have taken you up on that prayer.
Okay, so you're writing letters to yourself as a 23-year-old kid. The sentence about holiness that you've learned in 20 years of walking.
I don't know. I mean, holiness is a love story. I think it's just falling in love with Jesus. And there's ups and there's downs and he pushes on you and you push back on him and you let him down. You feel like he's letting you down at times. But you stay faithful and you journey to the end. And that's the happy ending.
Cheers.
So, all right.
We're done?
All done. I just have to stir in the cheese. So, yeah, here.
Thanks, man.
There you go.
I appreciate it.